Welcome to Mission Indy Possible. This is my Z6 with adapted lenses. You'll notice that there are actually no Z lenses in front of me right now. So really quick, we're going to go over some of the options, budget options. That's the big thing. Budget options with good glass. So while this I thought was the best bang for buck, the Z6 body, actually getting a lens for it that I could afford was a big deal, because the body I paid $1,300 for, and after that finding a lens that I could afford was really hard. Even the kit lens was about $350. I was able to get a APS-C Z mount lens, and that still costed $180 plus. Now I had to give up being full frame using an APS-C lens, which, why would you do that? It wasn't terrible, but it definitely, it was just a kit lens. So not only was it in crop mode, but it was only like a 3.5 to 5.6. So the first thing that I tried, so we're going to go over what I have in front of me. I tried using passive adapters. So we have here a passive adapter with an aperture adjustment. I tried using the Nikon FTZ adapter, so I could use the native F glass and adapt that to the Z mount. I tried using the Megadapt MTZ 11, which pretty much lets you adapt anything, including D lenses, with autofocus to the Z mount. I also tried this, it's Canon to Nikon Z adapter. It's the Fringer EF and Z. Now, an alternative, which I found actually works in tandem with it really well, is actually just having a second body. Now, you think this is crazy maybe because it's a D4 and saying, hey, look, I'm going to carry this around. That's an awful lot. Well, not just that, but the price tag on these things usually is pretty high. This one, though, I only got for $375, including shipping, and it only has 50,000 shutter releases. And I'll be talking about budget bodies, high-end budget bodies later. The things that are actually missing from here that I actually also tried was I tried the Kenko teleconverter, which is kind of similar to this. It doubles the length of the lens, but it fits onto the bottom of the body right here, right there at the mount, and so you can lock the lens on to the adapter and lock it onto the body, and has electronic contacts, so you don't lose autofocus. But I tried that. The one thing here that I wanted to try that I actually haven't tried it is using the Viltrox brand lenses. Now, I saw they had an 85mm with autofocus, and it seemed pretty comparable to the Nikon Z lenses. It's a Z mount, and it runs about $350. Except 85mm isn't something that I can use for all around. I shoot a lot of indoor stuff in tight spaces, the kids running around. So while I need the wide aperture that Viltrox has to offer, the 1.8, I also need the wider view, like a 28, and that's what this one is right here. It's a 75 to 28. Now, starting from the lowest one here, so I started out using the passive adapter, and obviously with the passive adapter, it has no electronic contacts, so I lost autofocus, metering, all those kinds of things. And I shot some sports with a passive adapter, and not this one, but I had a Canon FD F4 lens that actually worked okay, and I shot a football game with it, and I liked the way it came out, except my hand was about to fall off from all the autofocusing. So then I had tried using this Nikon FTZ adapter, which isn't too bad. The Nikon FTZ adapter, it got me about $100. Somebody actually had one, they've got two of them, and this one they did not need, so I got a brand new box for about $100. And the only thing about this one, actually, is it doesn't support any of the third-party lenses that either I can afford or I would use. So they have Tamron second generation, they have Nikon second generation lenses, and they work as well as this Tamron Canon adapted lens, except they cost a lot more. This lens was only $150, and that was shipped, and there's perfect condition. And this works like a native lens. I don't lose autofocus, metering, any of those things. So the adapter was about $220, and the lens was about $150. So for less than a kit lens, I was able to get this 2.8, 28 to 75 lens. And they have the same lens as a Nikon lens, except unless you use a Canon one, you can't use this generation, which is really strange, because this one works like it's a native lens, and it works pretty well. So I went from this passive adapter to this Nikon FTZ adapter, and I used the 50mm 1.8G Nikon lens, and that was really good. I really like that because you can get a lot of things where the people are running at you. And if you're using a passive adapter, you're constantly going like this, trying to focus with people running towards you. And it's doable, but it's very frustrating. So with the 50mm 1.8G lens, the Nikon lens, with the FTZ adapter, I didn't have to worry about that kind of stuff where the subject can run in any direction and I'm not going crazy with the focusing. And you get all the metering things. However, indoors, I needed something such as a 28mm lens, and pretty much every other lens that would fit on here was too expensive for me to afford. And so for a whole year, I only used a 50mm, thinking that I could just live with it. But I just kept wanting more. So I looked around, and I found this Megadapt MTZ 11. And I got this one from eBay, brand new, for $300 from QY Camera. The only thing is that if you don't buy from Megadapt, you lose their warranty. So this has no warranty on it. So you only save about $50 by buying it from a different seller, but you lose your warranty. So I don't know if that's worth it. But QY Camera did give me a $50 discount, and so that made it a little bit easier to obtain this. And I was hoping to do something where I could use the Viltrox and use this, so I could have something for the whole entire zoom range that I would need. However, the Viltrox one and this one together would have been over $600, and I might have just got a regular Z lens. So I didn't do that. So I'm missing a Viltrox lens from this lineup. The Megadapt lens, there's actually other ones that are very similar to this one. Other companies that make it are, I think, Tech Art. They have the TM or TZM lens. This is a focus adapter, which it just moves this little flange back and forth. So it doesn't matter if it has contacts or not in there. I mean, these things has no electrical contacts in it, and it's using a Leica M adapter, a Nikon F to M adapter, and it just moves this flange back and forth. So you just set it to infinity. You set the focus here to infinity, and the flange does the rest. And you still have to fiddle with it some, because it only moves a very short distance. But the focus actually works very well. It's just not super fast. So you can focus on things that are moving kind of in and out of this plane, or things that are moving across. But things running at you, like if a child runs at you to give you a hug, the camera's, it doesn't go crazy, but it's still focusing. You press the button, and if you have it set for shutter release on lock on focus, lots of times I don't get the photo. So you have to set it for shutter release when you press it, not on lock on focus, maybe on burst mode, and that would make it more possible. But you lose a lot of shots for things that are moving closer and farther away. But other brands that make similar ones are Tech Art, Photodiox. The only thing about those is the support for them. I never tried any of those, but as far as all the reviews on them is, this one seems to be a more durable one. It seems to have better support. This can be upgraded. The firmware can be changed, And this one seemed to have the best support. And it can support a lens about to 1.5 pounds, although I don't know that for sure exactly. So the largest lens I've really mounted on it is probably this lens here. And this one's a Canon FD lens. Canon FD lens. And it's a 2.8. It's a 135 millimeter 2.8. And I got this one for about 30 bucks. So for the price of this, which is $300, I could mount this $30 lens on here. So for $330, I have a 135 millimeter 2.8 lens. Or I can mount screw drive lenses on here. I got this lens for $50. So $350, I get a 50 millimeter lens. And if you're shooting portraits or not fast moving subjects, things that are running towards you, or if you're just very good at your focusing on top of its focusing, this is actually a really, really good option. And I actually sold my Nikon 50 millimeter 1.8 because I found that plenty of times the subject I was shooting was moving slow enough that I didn't need to do that. And instead of just dealing with the fact that it has slow focus, if I really needed to, I added a second body. So this D4 is a pretty fast focuser, and it can use D lenses. So if I really need to switch, and I'm really worried about that, I can even use this for portraits too. So there's a lot of things that this one can do. It just doesn't have in-body stabilization, and its video is not quite as good, but it's technique, right? So this is just a tool. So you can use D lenses with autofocus on the Nikon Z system. Anyways, the only thing that well, the two things for me that were kind of difficult, as I was saying, was one is there is a weight capacity to this, and it goes in and out. So you put your finger in there, it might pinch your finger, if you're trying to hold it, keep it from weighing on the body too much. So trying to put this 70 to 200 Tamron on here, it just wouldn't be safe without some sort of special carriage, and I haven't done anything like that yet. The other thing is the autofocus speed, of course, and the price, 300 bucks, that's, for me, that's still kind of high as far as budget goes. But that autofocus is an important thing to me. And one thing about this, even though it has autofocus, you have to dial in some of the settings on your own. It doesn't have any contacts to tell all the different things, the information being relayed. So you have to set your camera into aperture mode, and then turn set your camera to a certain mode and press the shutter button, and you have to remember that to tell that, hey, there's a 50 millimeter lens on here, so set the camera to know there's a 50 millimeter lens on here, so it does metering, in-body stabilization, all those kinds of things. So you have to set your camera. You can't just click the lens on and go. Now, that actually, you can do that with the FTZ adapter. You just click it on there and go. And so, I got really used to that, and it's very convenient not to have to mess around with all your different metering things and whatnot, the settings, And that's kind of how this Fringer EF NZ adapter is. All you have to do is put this adapter on, like you would put a regular lens on, and then you connect your Canon lens to the adapter, and that's it. So far, I've actually used this Canon adapter more than I use the FTZ adapter, because for the price and for the focal length, it's more practical for me. So I could pretty much just carry around this Canon 2.8 28 to 75, and I could carry around my second body, my D4, taking off the adapter, with this Tamron 70 to 200 2.8, and I pretty much have everything that I need. Now, you might say, oh, that's kind of an expensive lens on here, and this one actually sort of works with the FTZ adapter, But here's the thing. I bought two lenses. This one actually is a Minolta AF lens, and it was dropped, and this whole part was snapped off. So it was just broken right in half. Actually, this one was the Nikon lens. This is a Nikon motorized lens, but I converted it to a Minolta AF lens. So I JB welded it back together, and so now I have two lenses. I have this kind of messed up Minolta lens. It's a screw drive lens, but it's still a 2.8, and it's 70-200, and I can use it on other kinds of bodies, my Micro Four Thirds bodies, and it ends up being a 400mm lens. And so I took apart this broken, and this lens was $90. $90 for a broken zoom lens. And then I found a perfect condition Minolta AF lens. I thought it was a Canon lens, and so that's why I bought it. But then after I got them, I thought, well, these are both exactly the same model. And so this one, the seller didn't actually want it back. So he refunded almost all of my money. So this lens was about $50, and this one was $90. So then what I did was I disassembled both lenses, and I converted the Minolta AF lens to a Nikon lens. So now I have a lens that costs about $140, and they work. This one works just perfectly. About half of the lens is converted, but they're very similar. And the part that was broken, which was the bell at the bottom, those were duplicates. So I got about a $400 lens for $120. This body right here, this D4, the mirror drive, one of the gears in the mirror drive had two teeth shattered off of it. So I disassembled it and I rebuilt that one gear. So what they essentially sold me was a broken camera, and I just fixed that one gear. Now, there's plenty of ones where the screen goes bad or parts of it, but what we're talking about right now is just that you can afford to put decent glass on your Nikon Z. And it doesn't have to be just manual lenses. You have other things you can do. And even if you're using a manual lens, that doesn't mean you have to give up all the different options that having a fully compatible lens has. So just to recap really quick, the things that we have in front of me are going to be a passive adapter, which I don't use much at all. We have the Megadapt adapter, which I use sometimes, but the focus isn't super fast, and I don't like fooling with all the settings, so I don't use it that often, but I do use it. Then there's also the Fringer EF-NZ adapter, the Canon to Nikon Z adapter, and I use this one actually the most. Now the glass still is not the best glass you can get. I understand that Nikon makes very, very professional glass, and one of the things about the Z lenses is when I looked around, it seems that those are just plain sharper than pretty much everything here. But composition, experience, all those kinds of things, it's not so noticeable unless you're pixel peeping. Actually, to me, it's not noticeable unless you're pixel peeping. And if your thing is out of focus, or you can't shoot in the dark, or a million other reasons, well, it doesn't matter how sharp your lens is, you lose the shot anyways. And this one is incredible because this right here is also a Tamron lens, but this one was $17. So if you really, really, really were hard up, you could get the adapter for around $200 and put the $17 Tamron lens on here. These lenses, as far as focal lengths, are exactly the same, practically. This one is an 80mm or 28 to 80, and this one's a 75 or 28 to 80 for this cheap one, and 28 to 75 for the more expensive one. And by more expensive, this was like 20 bucks shipped. This one was $150-ish shipped. So, I mean, you practically have a lower quality kit lens for $220 right here. Or for this one, about $350 here. And this one retains all the autofocusing, all the other things that you would use out of a regular lens. And there's no manual adjustments or things you have to make. You just pop it on and you go. So there you have it. There are my alternatives to using a Nikon Z lens. Now, you have a lot of options. You have the telephoto lenses, which I don't like because they distort things. So even if you have, when I put these on my 50mm 1.8 glass, it came out kind of distorted. It's filtering through a very cheap piece of glass. So even though I get an ultra wide or this is only a 0.45, so about, what does it make, like a 28mm-ish lens to a 50mm, and this one makes a 50mm to about 100mm. So I could use these and I could get by, and they don't affect anything other than the quality of the photo. However, when I used, that's not true for the Kenko 2x telephoto lens adapter. That one actually, unlike these, since it had electrical contacts in it connected to the camera, something about it doubled everything. So if you were using a telephoto lens, then it would double that. So you'd turn that 50mm into 100mm. And it didn't really work for things that are less than 100mm. But if you put it on there, if you use the Kenko telephoto adapter, it would double the aperture. So it would take my 1.8 lens and turn it into like a 3.2 or 3.4 lens. So for indoor shooting or basketball, something like that, I would lose my large aperture. So even though that Kenko adapter was only about 40 bucks, I never used it because I lost that aperture. And these generic ones actually used more, and these ones were only maybe $40 for the wide angle and the telephoto. Anyways, there you have it. No Z lenses here. We just have the passive adapter. We have, they're kind of passive, these telephoto and wide angle adapters. We have some, I didn't really talk about these, but we have the ND filters, which help if you're going to try to use a lens. Some of these lenses, they don't have a clickable aperture on them. And if you don't have one of these with a clickable aperture adapter, such as the MegAdapt here, you have to adapt to the adapter. This adapter does not have an aperture adjustment here. So this one does, and it allows you to change the aperture. Well, if you're getting too much light in your camera, you just can't go any faster, or you don't want to turn up your shutter speed, you can use a variable filter, or just pretty much any filter, and it's like putting sunglasses on the end of it. So you just turn the ring on this variable filter, and you can sort of substitute changing your aperture, making a smaller aperture. You can substitute that for putting on your ND filter sunglasses and lowering the amount of light going into there.